All right. Hi, everybody. Here we are. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. So this is our first time with our YouTube channel. So everybody that's out there on YouTube, welcome. People that are out here live on Facebook, welcome. You can enter things into the comments and you can do likes and loves on that if you like. And we will start off promptly. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing this on Wednesdays at this time, 5 o'clock Pacific time, every Wednesday. Today we're starting a new series of conversations that last about 20 minutes or so, and they're on chapter 6 of Mind is the Athlete. So Mind is the Athlete, pages 123 to 126. That's what we're going to be discussing, and we're going to go through the whole chapter. So today is pages 123 to 126. So without further ado, my mom, Betty, is here, and off we go. This is her book, Mind is the Athlete.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
I did receive a couple of requests to do some of these Facebook Lives using Mind is the Athlete. So I'm going to do that a bit at a time. And today we are going to talk about identity, the reflection of consciousness, which in that book is chapter 6. So the seen, heard, and felt experience, that means all the stuff that I'm seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, tasting, etc. All of that confirms that I exist. Now, that's all that it does. It confirms that I exist. It doesn't tell me how I exist. It doesn't tell me what I'm all about. It doesn't tell me who I am. But I consciously am present. And I know that because I have all of this language around me confirming that I exist. Okay, so my understandable language, my point of view, if you will, it's accurate. It simply reports my current perception. It's reporting to me that I exist. And whatever I do, I look around and there's stuff going on. And again, it's saying, yep, you're there. Something's present. So as much as possible, you really want to get a firm sense of what your language world is all about. It is a comfortable and understandable form letting you know your current, I want to say predisposition, but that's not the word, but it's your current awareness of who you are. You know, Mrs. Laird used to say once in a while in talking to her that we might know that all is infinite mind, but as long as I exist as a two-legged thing called Margaret, then I know that that's still theory. So I have to pay attention. So as long as I live myself as Betty, then I have Betty to contend with, if I can put it that way. I know that 24/7, I have this Betty in front of the mirror, driving the car, fixing the dinner, talking, acting out. And the temptation is to live myself as if Betty and what Betty thought and what Betty did was the whole story. And really and truly, science comes along and says, it's not so. It's not so. That may be the way it looks, but there's something bigger. There's something a whole lot more powerful than Betty that's present when the language form, the understandable look called Betty, shows up. And that something that's present is what we have commonly accepted as being or God, existence or existing, the God idea. So there's a really, really a big, big distinction there. It makes all the difference in the way you live yourself. When I live myself as if Betty were of vital importance in the picture, I get myself in trouble because I'm operating from a misapprehension. I'm operating from a point of view that's not accurate. I really want to live myself consciously aware that this is the way it looks. But in my conversation with myself, speaking to be heard of God, so to speak, there's something else, not visible, not physical, not evident in the human picture, but the fact that the picture exists is dependent on that being present. So being itself shows up in language that I understand. One being, one action, one presencing, the nature of which is infinite. And that infinite being gives rise to all the seen, heard, and felt, every bit of it, including what I call Betty, including what I call the world I walk through, including what I call the pandemic threat, including what I call the political scene in the country and in the world, including the economic picture. So I really want to make that super clear, because that's where you need to stand, that understanding of the language world that you stand in each minute. You need to understand what that is. It's an information that tells you that you exist. It doesn't tell you the how, what, and why. Just the fact that you exist. Yes, existence is present. Being is present. Actions speak louder than words. When you think you understand that, it's living in terms of that understanding that distinguishes the way you live yourself. As much as possible, you really want to take a look at your conscious being of yourself, because that's what shapes who you are and the difference that you make in every moment's living. Another quote from page 123 says, "There is a transaction between observer and observed that has each experience be unique to each observer and unlike the experience of anyone else." I have to be unconcerned with the possibility that there is anyone else. I have to be totally present to the experience of one thing going on. And the transaction between the observer and the observed is one action. It's God being showing up like man. In very simple terms, the action of the God idea is what we call man. So man is the action of the God idea. Remember, physicists have told us that there isn't anything to observe until there's an observer. It's a lot of stuff to figure out here. On page 125 in Mind is the Athlete, I say, life is not contained in the body. Life is the presencing that has the body appear. Life is always the presencing. Reality is always the presencing that has the language show up. Now, whether the language shows up as Betty, or a house, or a car, or a tree, or a pandemic, or whatever else, what is it that has that show up? Guess what? It's always the God idea. It's the only source of action. It's always the God idea. And the experience of living in my human activity, looking like Betty, hinges on or is shaped by who I see myself to be. Let me say that differently if I can. Living myself divinely, living myself consciously aware that the infinite mind in action constitutes the language I call myself. Living myself consciously in that awareness shows up as peace and joy and power in human living. Identity is actually formless, perfect, and free. And like the individuality of being, it's entirely mental. All is infinite mind, infinitely manifest. Reality is present before language appears. Without reality, there is no language. So all the showing up in your world tells you that being itself being, is present. Your view of it is strictly yours. Your point of view your point of view has no substance, but you allow it by believing it. You allow it to direct your activity. And I don't say that like it's bad and wrong. I just say that what is running your show is always who you're being. So if I am not happy or healthy or wealthy or wise or all those things, I can't look to anything but who I'm being. But human beings always look to circumstances, situations, the weather, the pandemic, my friend or my lack of friends, my job, my promotion, my losing my job, my health. You name it. We have all the reasons why things are not just wonderful. Freedom from that bondage occurs when you begin to recognize who you are, the action of the God idea. The minute that begins to become clear to you, the minute that is acknowledged as your source, that very moment is an increment of freedom from being a victim of the language world, which is, after all, just information reporting back where you're standing. When identity, your identity, my identity, all identity, is consciously acknowledged as the presence of being, life becomes a journey in self-discovery. Now, that's a really important sentence. Let me read it again. When identity is consciously acknowledged as the presence of being, life becomes a journey of self-discovery. See, when we can be accurate in living our language world as our filtered point of view, our human experience becomes a conscious discovering of our divine being. It becomes the divine self, whole, perfect, complete, joyous, free. But it isn't the Betty that generates that. It's the being acknowledged. When language is acknowledged as source, then I have sin, disease, and death. Mary Baker Eddy made that very clear. But when source is acknowledged accurately, what I have is every possibility right there, right at my fingertips. Anybody have a comment before I go any further? Any questions?
We have had one comment, and the comment is, I think it's got to be Brad that might have put this in there. Every instant is the opportunity to rejoice in the demonstration of being itself being.
Yes, wonderful. Right on.
And I don't know if there's any comments over in YouTube, because when I go over there, I can't look without playing it, and then I get a lot of noise. So I've tried, but I haven't gotten that sorted out yet. So if there's any comments over in YouTube, I have no idea.
We're sorry about that. We're working out the technology here. Okay. So no questions?
If you have any questions, type them in, and they'll be a little bit delayed, but we'll get to them.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is, if you have questions, go ahead and put them up, because even if we don't have the time to talk tonight, I'll answer them, and Kim can put them up on the Facebook or YouTube or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so please put your questions in there. Okay, now on page 126, and Mind is the Athlete, the exploration of individual identity requires a continuous defining and redefining of who we acknowledge ourselves to be, both in thought and action. Answers on the level of language are never cast in concrete. Every time an answer appears, know that it's for the immediate moment only, and will redefine itself again and again as self-discovering expands. It's a little like peeling an onion. It's all onion, but no layer is the whole story. I'm waiting to see if there are any comments on that.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions in.
Good.
And one is from YouTube, so they actually come in here. This is great. Okay, so Melinda says, you say live in terms of your understanding. This is a choice, right?
Well, it appears to be that way, but it isn't actually true, because understanding is something you are. So it isn't like you do something to understand. It's like who you're being is that understanding. So let me see the question again, Kim.
Yep.
Yeah, live in terms of your understanding. We do. We're always living in terms of our understanding. And no,
whether you're consciously choosing it or not, you are.
Yeah, it's not a choice. There's no choice, actually. It's the only way you can live. You live in terms of your understanding. Totally. All the time. Thank you, Melinda.
Yeah. And here's Christine Johnson, who says, hello, Betty. Would you please explain what Mrs. Laird meant when she said spirit is visibility and tangibility? In the understanding of what is seen, touched, and felt is just a point of view.
Spirit is visibility and tangibility. Mrs. Eddy says on page 29 that being is spirit. So visibility, in fact, all the senses, feeling, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, all of that. Those sensibilities are all qualities of soul, qualities of the God idea. And that the language that shows up expressing that looks like we feel stuff and we hear stuff and we see stuff and so on. So leave the question up for me, Kim.
Yeah, I was just trying to have people see your face because it covers it up.
Well, that's not too bad. So in understanding that, what is seen, touched, and felt is just a point of view. The language that looks like a two-legged animal, feeling, tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, etc., that language is strictly point of view. It's the way I see myself. It's like the game of Monopoly. If I'm going to play the game and be a shoe on the board, it's the shoe that moves 5 spaces forward, collects $200 when it passes go. Betty's the thing in the background that moves the shoe. It's kind of like that. The God idea, being itself being, is what's present, showing up in the language, looking like you and me and everybody else, doing what they do, saying what they say, and being however they're being. The responsibility to be yourself divinely is you discovering the power present, calling itself you. It's not the two-legged animal elevating itself, figuring something out. Again, that may be the way it looks. It's never the way it is. Okay, and we will continue in the chapter 6 in Mind is the Athlete. Next week, we'll go a few pages further. I haven't figured it out yet, or I'd tell you, but we will do it again next week.
Yep. And what I want everyone to know is that if you don't have Mind is the Athlete and you'd like to get a copy, you can come to our website, scientificmetaphysics.org, and you can purchase there. Or you can get a Kindle version out on Amazon, or you can also purchase out on Amazon. So either way, fine. But if you want a copy of her book, you can do that. It's Mind is the Athlete. And you can get it again at our site, or you can get it at on Amazon in Kindle version. So you can get it right away. And which pages, Mom, are you going to cover next week?
Well, it will be starting with 127, and it might go to 129. I haven't checked it out yet, but
okay.
It'll be 3 pages or so.
You know to go in there and read a few more pages and then catch up on the pages that you've read. And again, this is going to be in our Facebook page. It's also going to be out on our YouTube channel. So for those of you who are out there on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. That would be great. We just created it, but we'd love to have people subscribe. So again, thank you so much for being here. And enter any questions that you have in the comments here on YouTube, and we'll be checking out there and we'll make sure that they get addressed. All right, until next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m. We'll see you then.
Thank you.